Alright guys, listen, if you're on a phone or a tablet, there's pretty much no way for you to set the quality up to 8K. So if you actually want to watch this vlog in 8K, you're probably going to have to go on a desktop or a laptop and use Google Chrome. If you're on Safari, the quality will not go up to 8K. So if you want to watch it in all of its gross detailed beauty, then gotta use a desktop. Alright? And I also wanted to preface this vlog by saying this camera's autofocus sucks and it gets out of focus. I'm not touching it. No one's holding this phone, and yet it has the hardest time not going completely blurry. So at several points in this vlog, you're going to see the footage get really, really blurry, and it's going to stay blurry for a long time. Eventually, it will fix itself, but at this point, there's no way around it. This is the latest version of the OS I can possibly run. There's no software updates available for the camera or the firmware. I've tried restarting the phone. This is just how 8K behaves. So, without further ado, here are my thoughts on the 8K video.
This is a first for Tailosive. We are filming at 8K resolution thanks to the Galaxy S20 Ultra. I apologize if the audio sounds a little bit weird because this phone requires filming at a very punched in angle. It's not very wide angle, you know, with like previous generation phones. We've had 4K just kind of become an option, but with this, it's kind of combining the tech of a bunch of sensors to make 8K possible, which is why I think it has to punch in so much. And it also means recording at 24 frames a second, which I'm not used to doing. I'm usually recording at 60, so it may seem a lot choppier than normal, but it's Tailosive Talks here. You know, we can talk about all kinds of stuff, whether it's tech, whether it's EV, because it's just talking. But I also like to talk a lot about creator-driven stuff, and given this is the first time I'm vlogging in 8K, I thought I would take a second to notice 8K is kind of overkill. Some of you may have 8K capable TVs, and if you're lucky enough to have one of those, maybe you're lucky enough to have an internet connection that can sustain an 8K video. And even if you're lucky enough to have both of those things, many of you probably have computers that even if they have the internet to sustain an 8K video, they don't have the processing power to sustain an 8K resolution. I know I do not have an 8K monitor, so I'm editing this on a 4K monitor, and I'm definitely getting a lot of the detail out of it. And just with quick glancing at the video itself, I can see it's pretty dang sharp. Almost too sharp, you know? We have not very perfect skin here, as I've talked about in the past, so you could see all the flaws with my face, and in that way, I don't think I'll ever switch over to 8K. I'm not even sure if it'll be a standard. Maybe if it does become a standard someday, you can come back to this video and say, see, Drew was wrong. He doesn't understand market trends, because clearly I don't. At this point, I feel like 1080p is still probably enough for most people out there, and anything above it starts to become less and less noticeable for, you know, average consumers. But the fact that 1080p, which is more than enough for most people, is about that much of the video you're watching right now, it's just a tiny, tiny amount of the pixels, showcases you how far camera technology has come, and the fact that smartphones are progressing and advancing so much faster to the point that my first experience ever with an 8K camera is the Galaxy S20 Ultra. It's not some DSLR, it's not some Blackmagic camera, it's a phone. That's the camera that gets 8K before anything else. In fact, I did not experience 4K video for the first time with a phone camera. I actually bought a Lumix FZ1000 specifically because I saw that it was at a decent price point and it had 4K at just 30 FPS capability. It wasn't too fancy, but it had a fixed lens, and I could not wait to try it out. I remember patiently waiting in the mail to finally get a 4K camera because I knew YouTube supported it. So it didn't even matter to me, really, if the image got better or worse. I just wanted it to be 4K. And I was coming from a Canon T2i, which basically maxed out at 1080 at 30. That couldn't even do 1080 at 60. And honestly, because it had manual lens attachments and I could put any type of lens I wanted on that thing, it still looked pretty good. I mean, some of the earliest videos on my Tailosive Tech and regular just Tailosive channel were shot on that camera, and we could get some decent imagery out of it. And I think from that, I learned that it's not just about the pixels. You know, you can have cameras that have technically larger sensors or technically more resolution and not necessarily better image quality. There were a lot of times I was editing video from that Lumix camera, and while it did shoot in 4K or 1080 at 60 if I wanted as well, I noticed that the overall image that most people were looking at didn't really change much. There wasn't really a noticeable difference for most people, especially given most of YouTube is viewed on phones now. And for a while, phones were moving towards this 1080p, 1440p, and even a couple phones out there became 4K on the actual displays, but the markets didn't really move in that direction. We saw the best-selling iPhone be a 1080p display, and then it slowly moved to phones like the iPhone XR, the iPhone 11, and they actually had worse resolution screens, which was kind of interesting. So the fact that the market had the option to increase resolution, and Samsung used to ship their phones with 1440p on by default, but then they started to preserve battery life. They started keeping it down at 1080 because they noticed most people couldn't tell the difference, and you could prolong battery life, which was more important, if you turn down that resolution, and now it's something you have to activate in settings. So now that we've seen Apple have massive success with non-1080p displays, we've seen Samsung start shipping 1080p by default, that's making me think that majority of content might actually stay at 1080p for a long time. You reach a point of the law of diminishing returns where the effort it takes to get internet and to get a computer and to get a display that can actually output at a resolution that high that's noticeable, it's just so inconvenient that the things you get out of it, the resolution and the quality you get out of it, just doesn't really become worth it. At a Best Buy or something, when you've got 4K TV on one side, 1080 on the other, sure, yeah, that's really noticeable. You can be like, okay, I see 4K there, I see 1080 there. 4K is obviously clearer, but it really doesn't happen in modern day that much. For the most part, we buy TVs and we watch content on them, and it all just comes down to, does it look good? And does something have to be 4K or 8K to even look good? I don't actually think so. I think you can make things look pretty good with a 1080p resolution. It's really just the detail in the canvas. It's not the artistry of the paint. So it's giving you a different type of canvas to work with when you have resolutions this high, but as a lot of you are probably commenting already, you may have issues with the quality or the frame rate or the coloring or the autofocus may be acting all weird. So in that sense, no, just simply having more pixels doesn't necessarily make it a better image. And I'm just excited to edit this video, which I will fill you guys in on later, just to see how the iMac Pro can handle 8K, because personally, I have no intentions on buying an 8K camera anytime soon. Like a dedicated one, not a smartphone, but I'm still curious to see how the iMac Pro can handle it. If it's going to have a really hard time editing it, or if it's going to just handle it just like it would handle any other footage. Because it is 24 FPS, because the iMac Pro is used to editing 4K at 60 all the time, and it handles that fine. So 8K, probably a little bit more challenging, but it is also shot on a phone, so that might make it a little bit easier. But anyway, let me know your guys' thoughts on 8K video. Do you think I'm wrong? Do you think the resolution will eventually become the standard, or is 1080p forever?
Okay, so I just finished editing the video on my iMac Pro, and it handled it pretty much okay. There was a little bit of choppiness, but it wasn't unbearable. It wasn't like I could barely edit this footage at all. It technically works, just not very well. So if at some point in my life I decide I want to start filming things in 8K, yeah, I'll probably need a new Mac of some sorts that's much more popular. Not the Mac Pro, that's not happening, but my guess is the actual 8K camera itself would be probably a lot more expensive than the new computer I would need to edit it. So anyway, thank you guys for watching. Hope you have an excellent day. Take care.